James, thank you very much indeed. It's a real privilege to be able to come and address you this afternoon and try and allay some of the fears that I know are going around and the concerns that residents have about where we are in the plan making process. I realise that the plan making process can be very disconcerting. There's things going on which people really don't understand, and my job, or one of my jobs this afternoon, is to explain where we are and what is going on, and perhaps more importantly, what we've not got to. And one of the things I need to say straight away is that the local plan is an ongoing process, and the council are only at the first stage. As such, the council have not made any decisions about anything. It will take the council at least until the end of 2017 to complete the local plan process, and there will be more consultation with the local community here in Chaldon and elsewhere before the council makes any decisions where development may go. And I'm sorry if I keep mentioning process this afternoon, that's deliberate. We have to get the process right. If we don't get the process right, when we get to the examination, whenever that is, the inspector will just not give us a day before he'll say, go away and try again, unless we get the process right. The local plan is for a 20-year period, plan period. Therefore, if development is to take place, it will be phased throughout the 20-year time frame. It will not all be built tomorrow. And most importantly, the council will have to demonstrate that there is sufficient infrastructure in place to support the development, and that has to be done in consultation with all the infrastructure providers. The council are committed to work with the appropriate infrastructure providers throughout the preparation of the local plan. We risk it being thrown out if we don't, to ensure that we continue to understand the infrastructure pressures on the district and that these are suitably dealt with through the local plan. We have to convince people that we've been through the process and considered everything. The consultation, and I've put consultation periods because there's more than one, there's the current one, is everyone's opportunity to have their say on the local plan before we continue to the next stage of plan making. It really is very good to see so many people having an interest and turning up this afternoon to talk about the local plan, and I'll do my very best to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll say so. I've only got to fall back on 2,500 pages of documents. So if I don't know an answer, I'll say so, and we'll get back in touch with you and give you a response if I possibly can. However, I'm hoping this afternoon I can deal at the very high level of planning and settle some of the concerns. We understand there is a concern about the potential sites. However, the council are not considering all these sites. Some people have seen the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment, called by us the Cllr, as an assessment of sites that have been submitted by landowners and developers for the council to consider as potential development opportunities. We've asked landowners to submit to us, as we're required to do under this process, whether they want any land considered, and therefore if people have put the land in, wherever it is, we have to look at it and assess it. There is no way that the council will be allocating these sites for development. However, we need to make information available to everyone so that they can have their say. Unfortunately, this is a difficult process the government makes us go through. And again, if we don't consider every site. We'll have the inspector at the inquiry afterwards for not doing so. And I'm sure our friends, the development industry, will be not backward in coming forward and saying, well, you haven't considered my site. So if we actually want to leave sites out, we have to have a good argument for doing so. That's why we need to look at some of the sites that have been put forward. And I'm not surprised that some of the sites are in the green belt. They're bound to have been. I would be surprised if they weren't. And we have to have good, sound reasons which we're prepared to argue in front of an inspector at the inquiry when we get to it for not developing them. As I've said, our local plan for Tandridge will set out the vision for the district for the next 20 years and provide a framework for future improvement, development and local protection of the area, Chaldon and wherever else, and particularly the Greenbelt. Our local plan will have objectives identified during the development of the plan, and these will be shaped by the issues facing the district, that's all the district, national planning policy, which we have to follow, Jeff's neighbourhood plans and any other neighbourhood plans that have been written and are going through the process, evidence from a range of assessments that we have to provide, and community and other feedback gathered through formal consultations. The development of the final local plan takes time and a great deal of careful consideration. There is this legally required, prescribed process that the council has to go through to ensure the different ways of meeting future employment, future business, future housing and leisure are all considered. We have to consider all these. The first stage we're currently consulting on looks at a range of approaches to meet the development needs and carefully consider the responses from the residents. So your responses are really, really important. And I will be looking at them all carefully, and so will my colleagues. And these are regarding from the residents, from businesses, from developers, and the infrastructure providers. I really know it's worried people, as some people have referred to the 9,400 homes that the council must provide. However, must provide is not actually the case. The council has to, as the government has laid down, we must identify their objectively assessed need, sometimes called objectively assessed housing need. But just to make it interesting and make it more difficult, we call it OAN, objectively assessed need. As I said, this is a government requirement, and they have provided a detailed methodology about how this assessment of need should be undertaken. The council have followed this approach to be compliant with national policy. And we'll have to consider it again, as we've got another year or so before we get to the inquiry. That assessment of need, and need is perhaps slightly unhelpful, that is the idealistic point of view of looking at the situation without any constraints. We have to look at what we need to provide as a starting point, based on the population, how it's going to grow over the 20-year period, what the migration in and out of Tandridge is over that period in the market housing area that covers Tandridge. And there's a brilliant document being written by one of our consultants about how we reach the number of 9,400 houses. Please, if you read nothing else, please find that document on the website and read it, and it explains the background to how that figure is. Having got that figure, we then set it on one side, and we have to look at what I've all been outlining already of what we can actually fit in. The council can, having done that and put it on one side and know it's there, and that perhaps is the target, can then begin to take account of constraints that would mean that they cannot meet those full needs. The council has to demonstrate that they have considered all the options available, and unfortunately this means looking at greenbelt sites. As such, the council in their local plan have at this stage identified 6 delivery strategies for development. And I've heard it said, well, why have you considered all of those? We don't want to give up any green belts. And as I've said before, we need to look at a range of delivery strategies for housing and business and industrial estates in order to decide that, having looked at it, we don't want to do that. You can't just go into the quarry and say, I want to use approach 2A, and the inspector will turn around and look at you and say, well, what about 1, 2B and 3 through to 6? Give me a reason why you're not doing those. And that's part of the process. And I know it's disconcerting, but in order to get in front of the inspector in good shape and be able to argue our case, we have to look at all these range of options. And the options are providing houses, 2,338 dwellings, that's the first approach, 2A, right through to 10,128 dwellings, which is from approach 5. And the approaches you need to look at in the Chaldon area particularly are approach 3 and 5. The council still have a lot more work to do on refining these approaches. Indeed, we may decide that we're going to put in a slightly variation of one of them rather than the approaches as they are. But we will have looked at the whole range and be able to put ones on side we don't want to do with a full sound argument for not having put it forward. At the moment, we're at a very high stage of planning. I call it a broad brush approach to planning at the moment. However, we wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to comment before we started to refine the approaches and before we made any decisions. The council have also carried out a green belt assessment, which is also available on our website or at libraries for people to comment. The green belt assessment identifies areas for further investigation that the council will have to consider as it prepares its local plan. At this moment in time, the areas for further investigation have not been incorporated into the local plan, as the council want to gain the community's views on this. However, when the green belt assessment is included within the local plan, it will remove a large number of the sites. I'm advised by the officers that there's no areas of further investigation where development may take place in Chaldon. And why do we need the local plan? Well, our local plan allows local people to have a say on setting local planning policies. This gives the council, once it's devised and approved, some control over how our area grows and develops in the future and how we can protect it. Without a local plan, future development will be decided solely in line with the national planning policy framework. By consulting on and creating our local plan, our future planning policies can reflect the things that are important to those living, working and visiting our district. Our local plan is created by Tandridge District Council in consultation with interested parties and follows a process laid out in the national planning policy, and it involves several stages. We have to work closely with our neighbourhood authorities and understand their local plan progress. If we have any unmet housing need, we need to try and get neighbouring authorities to assist us in meeting this need. That's called duty to cooperate. and it's one of the things that the inspector at the examination will look at first. With authorities around us having similar constraints, such as areas of outstanding natural beauty and greenbelt, this is really very challenging. However, if the council do not undertake these discussions, we will fail the examination and not even make it past the first day. As such, we will be told to go back to the start and redraw the plan, which has happened in mid-Sussex. We don't want to be in this situation. I don't want to be in this situation. And whilst there are some very difficult decisions that will eventually have to be made, the council are in a better position to have a local plan. Unfortunately, we must be led by the evidence to have a plan, found sound by inspector, and an important part of this process is the consultation we're currently undergoing. And we know, and I apologise if some people have difficulty with our online system. And if this is the case, then people can submit their comments by email or letter. We would recommend that people send comments via electronic means if they possibly can, as it takes the officers a very long time to input all the hard copies into the online system. And sometimes it is difficult to ensure that the point that each individual is making has been accurately recorded. You can go up when it's all on the system, you'll be able to go in and check it. But sometimes reading handwriting is very difficult and we don't want to miss the point that is being made. I can give the website addresses, Chairman, if you want to, or we can repeat them at the end, but I've got to the end of what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Or
we can do the website addresses at the end, I think.
Right.
But I suspect we may have some questions from the audience, so now would be the time where we're going to have questions. What I would say is we do ask everyone restricts themselves to one question. As you will understand, there's a lot of people here and a lot to get through. Where can I start? Okay, first hand next to Jackie there.
It was a question for you, James, actually. In terms of the response from the Village Council, will that be made available before the deadline submission so that villagers can actually see what the proposed response is from you?
Okay, the first thing is I'd ask that we take each person in turn, so if we could direct questions towards David. I will pick up on that quickly, which is just that Bob Milton's speaking later on and we'll go into more detail about the council response. Okay, chat there, if that's okay. Sorry, there's a mic coming to you.
Okay. I live in Chaldon Common Road, or just off Chaldon Common Road, so appreciate that. I appreciate you're going into a consultation and evaluation process. Presumably at some point it's going to be whittled down, so then there'll be a smaller number of sites that we'll be looking at in more detail. What criteria are going to be used in that whittling down process, and what time frame until that first whittling down process takes place?
Sorry, was anybody able to hear the question?
You don't want to switch it on?
Okay. I'll just repeat it briefly and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I found it now.
Do you want to go through it again?
Yes, it was really a question of when this evaluation process proceeds, there'll be some criteria that you're going to use to whittle down the various sites to a smaller number. What is that criteria and what time frame might that be?
well, all the sites is going to be an ongoing thing, because at the moment we will have had sites there in the Cllr. There will be more coming in as the process goes on. Some will be taken out and then people who want to bring them back in. So it's a live situation the whole time. But the initial consideration of the sites is whether they're suitable, whether they're available, and if they've obviously been put forward, they tend to be available, whether they're achievable, whether you can actually get into them, whether they're developable, and whether they're deliverable. Now, all those answers have a very special planning reason, and I'm not sure I can give you that, but I'm happy to come back to you. But that's the first stage. And then, of course, once we've done that, once all those sites are in that, we'll then look at them to see whether they're in a sustainable position next to one of the towns or villages, whether they're in the green belt, whether they're in the area of outstanding natural beauty, and each site will have to be considered against all these criteria, and that's how they will be whittled down. And then we'll probably at the end come to a choice of, well, what are we actually going to deliver in the way of houses, so how many sites do we need? So that's going to be the process. And we'll be getting to that situation fairly soon. It'll be sort of summer to the end of the year when we're getting to that sort of, and we will be going out to consultation on that again. So your question gives me a brilliant opportunity. I can understand why people want to write reams against not putting a particular field or whatever it is into this consideration. What I don't want you to do is knock yourself out spending hours writing reams why a site shouldn't go in when it may get knocked out by this process I've just described. Because I think that will put people off. I don't want them to feel they've spent hours on a site which later gets knocked out. There is another consultation to come on that very thing. Sorry, it's a long answer.
I think I'm allowed a quick follow-up, but you appreciate that anybody currently thinking of selling their property in this area, everything is on hold. And it's going to be on hold until either Ross Lane or Chaldon or the golf club are written out of the process.
Right.
Okay, do we have another question? Can we have one from, we've got Roger down the front here, just to the other side of you.
Roger Davis. I'd like to question, my question to do with the numbers.
Yeah.
There's a bland reference, I call it bland because it suddenly pops out there, of 9,400 homes over the next 20 years. Now, your last plan included, was only for 2,500 homes over exactly the same amount of time, i.e. 20 years. That was based on the fact that Tandridge was mainly greenbelt, and it was agreed that major development would take place in other areas, even outside Surrey. Now, it's very difficult on your site to find out where this magic number came from, because there's no direct references, but digging down through it, it seems to me it just comes from government statistics, and I think it's based essentially on the fact that in previous years X was built, and therefore you need to build accordingly. Now, why don't you, in terms of localism, question that? Why don't you, it's within your powers surely to say that figure is incorrect. Now, there's one other area within the information which is back in the plan, and that's in regard to the type of housing. And this is another huge query I have, because of 9,000 houses, 6,500 houses are for 65 plus, and in fact 4,000 of those are for 75 plus, which seems ridiculous. And not only that, you might imagine they're small little homes for pensioners, but they're not. About 4,000 of that are actually detached and semi-detached houses. So that both of those parts really do give me a big problem. Thank you.
Right, as far as the number of where we were under the old South East area plan, the numbers were worked out by working upwards. Tandridge, it was decided, and I can't remember where it was decided, could only manage 125 houses a year for the planned period. That's where the figure came from. And when I became chairman of planning policy, Bob Evans, who was still the director in charge of planning, said, when I went to my first public meeting with other people in Surrey, he said, just keep quiet about it. That's a nice figure for us. We don't want any more. So that's what is worked up as a bottom-up figure. The 9,400 is on a methodology that the government have imposed on us, and is on a statistical basis using the statistics that the government issue. And we can't avoid doing it that way. If we go into the inquiry not without doing an OAM figure, in the proper way, then the inspector will throw us out if we haven't done it that way. I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with the figure. I know a lot of people challenge it. But the one thing I haven't yet heard is a reasoned argument why it should be different. And I'm absolutely sure, and I say this even though I suspect there will be people from the house building industry in here, I quite expect them to say our figure is wrong because it's too low. We've got to put up with that before we get to the end of the process. So there's completing things going on here. And as a part from your point about the mix of houses, I think that could take a whole afternoon debate on its own, and I agree with you. I've got a concern about that, and we do need to deal with that. But we haven't got there yet. That will be discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
As some of you may know, we have additional people in the school hall as well. They're submitting questions written, and Julian's going to read one out now, I think.
Thanks, James.
Bring the mic on, Julian.
Thank you. It's a switch. Is it the one that says off and on? Good Lord, thank you for that. Cheers, Pat.
I'm doing the comedy.
Thanks, Councillor. Got a question from next door, which I think probably some people in here will also have the same question, which is, has Tandridge been approached by Croydon to accommodate its lack of building sites, and if so, how many?
I'm not aware that Croydon have approached us, but there's consultation and discussions going on between officers the whole time. But I don't, not as far as I'm aware, and that's one thing I'm usually aware of because they tend to write to the chairman of the committee about, can you take on some of our houses? And we too will be writing to them, can you take on some of our houses? It hasn't happened yet, but I haven't got at the back of my mind, or even at the front of my mind, how many. I know that Croydon are not intending to try and build all their objectively assessed housing needs, so they've got a shortfall, so have London, but that matter isn't dealt with in the 9,400 houses that the gentleman down here mentioned. That's done by what is called duty to cooperate, where the councils have to talk to each other, and I suspect, as I said, that we're not going to be able to help them out because we're going to have a problem meeting our own objectively assessed needs. Thank you for the question.
Okay. There's a question at the back there. If we could get a mic up there, please. And then Julian, I'll come back to you again for another one next from the school hall.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget that in the other room there are about as many people sitting there as there are here. So a good 300 to 400 people, about 20% of the population of Chaldon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do feel that we should have 1 minute to express our feelings as well, and not just ask questions. So I'll just take 1 minute to express the issues that I've heard from a number of residents and neighbours in Chaldon.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you now. I'm afraid we are going to do that at the end of the meeting if we have time. But
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
And this question is based on the figures that you have mentioned. There are apparently 700 dwellings in Chaldon at the moment. 1,300 new homes would mean a tripling of the dwellings in Chaldon. That would mean requirements for schools for 2,000 more children, taking 1.5 children per family. We have an already fully burdened road network, which we saw very clearly that Tandridge District Council was not able to deal with in the last years, if we look at the potholes. We have amongst the highest council taxes in the whole country. We have waits of 4 hours and plus for children at the A&E in Reigate Hospital, which is a scandal. My question to you, sir, is, can we do anything to prevent this from happening? And if you're saying this is going to be taking 20 years, honestly, I don't want to be living here with 20 years of building construction in the area going on. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm not sure there's a question in there really. There was a lot of statements and
to prevent this? Is the full question.
So for the benefit of those in the school hall as well who may not have heard that, the question has been clarified to, is there anything that can be done by Chaldon residents to prevent this development?
Well, there's no development proposed at the moment. I keep making that point. The council have not made any decisions yet. I know sites have been put in to the hat because we've done a call for sites, because we do need to know what land is available. And as I've said earlier, some of those sites, and not surprisingly, are green belt sites. And we've we've calculated the number of houses that can go on those sites, so that we've got some idea of what we're talking about in the number of houses that we could provide under the number of options that is shown in the paper. And we need to know that in order that we can begin to do some of the background work on what's that going to mean to the roads. What if we build all these numbers of houses, what is it going to do to the roads? What is it going to mean to the doctor's provision? Are we going to be able to cope with that? And all this, before we go into examination, we've got to be able to demonstrate that it's not only building houses, but having jobs for the people in those houses, but can we provide the facilities, can we provide the infrastructure and all that means to support those houses? So, and you asked me a question, how can we stop it? Do we really want to stop this process of getting a new local plan? If you want to stop it dead in the water so that you're open to everything being decided in the council on planning permissions under the national policy framework, we'll be having building on green belt sites quicker than anything. The developers are waiting there to do it. The best way we can assure of protecting the green belt, our green belt, is to go through the plan process. Because we've decided to start this process, that's given us a measure of protection against developers putting in applications on sites they would like to develop. There's several in Oxted that I'm well aware of and constantly reminded of, and the developer has held off putting in an application because he knows that now is not the best time for him to succeed with it while we're doing the plan process. If we stop it or put a halt to it, we reduce the level of that protection. It's not absolute, but we're always trying to keep ourselves in the best place possible. So, and if we stop it, we will have developers putting in applications saying, you haven't been able to justify or stop us or talk about us putting houses on that site. So let's be very cautious. You can certainly comment on the application, you can comment on the whole of the questions that we're asking you, but I would caution about trying to stop the process, because stop the process is not the way to go. We've decided in the council that our old plan, our old core strategy wasn't giving us the protection because of the numbers under the objectively assessed need, and we need to make sure we're in the best possible position to protect our green belt sites. So, you know, be careful what you wish for.
Julian, would you like to give us another one from the school hall?
Thanks, James. This is from Philip Rusted from the Heath. He's asking around the housing density for Ross Lane and the Golf Club. Philip's pointed out that the estimated site yield at Ross Lane is different to that for the Golf Club. Ross Lane's site yield is based upon 26.5 dwellings per hectare, whilst the Golf Club is only 15. Could you comment on that, please, Councillor?
No idea. No idea. I haven't even begun to look at the detail of it. Sorry. I'm not carrying that level of information around with me. But if that gentleman or lady wants to put the question and send it through to the email address, we'll certainly come back to it. But I haven't got that information on me at the moment. I've got a big box of papers, and I'm not sure I'd even find the answer to that question without an hour's look through it all.
Adele, I think we have a question just next to you as well there, if we could.
Hello. In the HELAR documents, the Surrey National Golf Club, some of the grounds identified as unsuitable for development because it's protected, conservation area. The vast majority of it is already identified as suitable for development. Can you explain why it's already identified as suitable?
Well, it's suitable is as I answered this gentleman down here. There are 5 things that we have to consider when the site comes in. We're not talking about whether it's in green belt, whether it's an area of outstanding natural beauty, how it's rated under the green belt assessment. The first thing we look at is whether it's suitable. Could it be delivered as a site? Nothing simpler, nothing more complicated than that. And obviously you've got a road access in there. Yes, it could be delivered as a site. And that's all it means. None of the other things have been looked at. So we've got to consider the site's in the green belt, so it's protected in that sense. And we'll have to go through all the things I outlined earlier before we even considered it. And as I said, there are no sites in Chaldon labelled for further investigation. We're not going to be looking at the golf club site again at the moment. So, you know, we haven't totally ruled it out, but it's unlikely that we're going to look at it.
Okay, I'll take a few more questions, then we're going to have to move on. Well, I think there's one just there, if you could go there, please, Jackie, with Ted Howard.
Is this on? Yeah. Councillor Weightman, that was a good review of your current position, but at the same time, and I know Jeff is going to be talking about the CR3 plan, which is now almost concluded. If that goes ahead successfully by the end of the year, for example, and it becomes a positive thing that has legal status, you didn't mention actually whether that would have any effect on the consultation for the local plan at Tandridge. It will give residents a certain power, I realise that, but you didn't actually mention, and I know Jeff's going to speak about it in more detail. Can you just comment before you finish, actually?
Well, if the local plan will be kept under review as you go through the process of adopting the neighbourhood plan, that will be watched by officers and members to see what's in it and what's... But the neighbourhood plan is meant to sit under the local plan, which sits under the NPPF. So it was once described to me like a chest of drawers. The top one is the National Planning Policy Framework, our local plan next, and the neighbourhood plan underneath. And they should all sit together. Now, interestingly, the Woldingham plan, which was very close to being adopted and has been in front of an inspector, has a policy in it about not making sites smaller than 0.2 hectares. And the council told them, well, we didn't think that was a suitable policy to have in the neighbourhood plan. It didn't conflict with the current core strategy, but the inspector actually disagreed with the council on that and said, no, this is a good place to have that policy in the neighbourhood plan because it's unlikely to be dealt with anywhere else. So all the plans should fit together, but there's a hierarchy about them, how they fit together. And we may have to do some quite fast footwork if Jeff's plan is completed and adopted to make sure that they don't conflict with each other. There may be adjustment needed as we go through, but the local plan is going to take much longer than it's going to take to adopt the neighbourhood plan. But I noticed in the press somewhere talked about the neighbourhood plan controlling what's in the local plan. I saw that in an email or a tweet or somewhere, and that's a misunderstanding of the hierarchy of the plans. But they should all fit together, and you get the top drawer out first, then the local plan, and then the neighbourhood plan. That's how they should fit together legally. That's the intention anyway.
We'll have one more from the school hall and then one more down here, and then I'm afraid we'll have to move on.
Thank you, James. Councillor, this question is, when and how will the public be informed of any sites that have or will be submitted since the HELAR report, given that the closing date is the 26th of February?
Well, yes, I may have confused people there. What I was trying to point out that is, you know, the sites, call for sites is a constant thing. It will be always on. And I didn't want people to think that because a site isn't in now, it's not going to arise later. Like all this documentation, it's like accounts have been described to me as a set of accounts or a snapshot of where you are at the moment. And that's similar to where we are in this process. It's a snapshot of where we are at the moment, but it's going to be moving on. I'm not quite sure how we're going to deal with that, how we can identify what additional sites are, but I'm sure everyone in their own area will soon get very adept at drilling down on the website to find the other sites. But thank you for the question. I'll make sure I know the answer next time it's asked.
Okay, and then there's one more in the front row, if that's okay. Sorry, if you wait, I'll get back to you.
It's very unfortunate that Sam Geemer is yet again unable to attend a local meeting, which is a huge concern to the local residents. Has Sam expressed any view on this process and any of the sites that have been identified so far? And have the council expressed any view to Sam as our local elected representative in Westminster about the process, which seems to be quite monstrous and, as has already been suggested, leaves a blight over this area for about 20 years and is completely unacceptable?
I'm going to be honest with you, somebody else mentioned blight over there. I'm not quite sure how that works, and somebody better explain it to me because I don't understand it. Blight, if a site was up potentially for compulsory purchase, that can put a blight on it, but in the sense I know blight, I don't quite understand this because we're talking, you know, but as far as the Sam Geemer question is concerned, I was speaking to his PA the other day and he's getting a huge amount of emails on this and what's he going to do about it. I mean, he is a member of the government, and the government and the previous government have said this is the way we are going to do planning policy. This is how we're going to make local plans. And that's the process the government have set down. And I mean, I understand people's concern, but there's not a lot as an MP that Sam can do about it. The process...
New MP then?
Well, not any MP can do anything about the process. If you've got objections, if anyone, you should be writing to me, because I'm the person that's chairing the committee that's dealing with this.
I think you missed
Sam,
the point.
Sam,
David, I think you missed the point. With the
What?
greatest respect, the process itself is a centrally driven
yeah,
concept idea that has to be utilised by local authorities, and we understand that.
yeah.
The issue is that whatever you do, you lose at the end of the day because government have got the MPFF that they can come in on the back of and say, well, you're not doing what we want, so we will do it this way. Now, that is wrong. It's fundamentally wrong because it means that government can always impose their will on local communities without listening to them. And what you're saying is that local MPs cannot express a view over such a monstrous process.
With respect, I don't think it's particularly fair to expect Cllr Weightman to answer for Sam Geemer or anybody else.
It should be here.
Be that as it may, that's...
He's not able to answer questions as I've done this afternoon on the local plan process. I'm the one that's chairing the meeting on the process. The process has been given to us quite rightly, as you say, by the government, and Sam I have had a conversation because he's been talking to, or his PA I've been talking to, and you write to him, and what do you want him to do? Change the process. Why? Yes. Well, all right. Why change the process?
Well, okay, because it leaves them with all the control over what's happened, Johnson.
Yeah, but that's always been the case.
Oh, well, so that's okay.
No,
Right,
I'm not
I
saying
think-
it's okay, but that's
Right, I think we're getting bogged down in this a little bit. Can we pass the mic just over this way, please?
So,
Yeah.
actually, I've got two questions. The first one is a very quick yes or no. The first one is Tandridge District Council 806% ahead of its 5-year target for building new houses?
I've heard that figure quoted, yes.
Yes, okay.
But it has to be, and we've had to be in that position in order to protect the green belt. because other sites come into consideration if we're not in that situation.
Okay, the main question I have is, I think most people here can think of lots of reasons why the two sites that are in Chaldon are not suitable. The infrastructure we don't believe will cope, the roads are inadequate, the schools won't cope, the public transport is not there, the doctor surgeries won't cope, you know, the tip, Tesco's, area of outstanding natural beauty, Greenbelt. What is it that will make the difference? If 400 people from Chaldon submit their objections, is that what the planning committee will listen to, or is it the other things? What is it that we need to do to make sure that we don't get 1,100 houses on the golf course site and 250 houses on Ross Lane?
Well, again, you write in, the council are in listening mode on what people want. We're very much in listening mode. We want to hear what the opinions are. But I mean, people are very site driven, and I understand that. We don't want this site developed because we think it's inappropriate. We need to have your reasons why it's not inappropriate from the local point of view, because we've got to go and argue it in front of an inspector. So don't just say it's inappropriate. We need the reasons why you think it is. And you've outlined a lot of those. You've outlined a lot of those. But what we've got to be careful of is the doctors turn around and say, well, we're opening a new surgery, we're expanding this, we can cope with those houses. Maybe
Can't cope at the moment.
I know, but we're talking about a planned period of 20 years.
But sir, we cannot even cope with the situation today with the infrastructure. It's impossible. This is what we're saying. We do not have an infrastructure in place to be able to cope with the situation as it is today.
I agree. I understand that. And that's part of plan making, to see whether the infrastructure providers can in fact service the buildings. That's part of the plan making process. We haven't got to that part yet. And certainly my concern is that one of the things that is a worry I have is that the doctors and the surgeries are not engaging with us about this. They are very aware, because I've had meetings with my local practice about where they are, and that people are waiting 3 weeks to see their doctor, although there's a sea change going on about not seeing your own doctor, but being able to see a doctor very much more quickly than that. But that's a process going on. They're very aware of that.
Councillor Weightman.
Yeah, sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. If you
No. Well, I'm just saying, we have to deal with, as I said early on, we are going to have to convince an inspector that we can provide the infrastructure to support any houses we build. And I would have thought that was some sort of reassurance to the concerns that are in this meeting.
Apologies for interrupting. I think we're now getting to a point, I'm aware we're moving towards 3:30, where we need to move on. So I'd like to thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today.